Welcome to the Metapolitical Podcast, where we analyze politics beyond ideology, focusing on what is, not what should be. This is your host, Jim Jakiko. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about the Conservative Party of Canada, specifically their call to end birthright citizenship in the country. Let's dive right in. Where does it all begin? About 2 weeks ago, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre reignited a conversation that nobody's really had in a while. In a Facebook post, he said, and I quote, "Conservatives will protect the value and integrity of our citizenship by putting an end to birth tourism. Canadian citizenship is an honor and privilege, and it must always be treated as such. Sign to end birth tourism, insert link here," end quote. So this post piles on to an earlier policy suggestion made by another Conservative MP, Michelle Garner, who wanted to end birthright citizenship. For those who are unaware, Canada has a jus soli citizenship framework, which essentially means right to soil. So anybody who's born in Canada is automatically granted Canadian citizenship. It's been this way for literal generations. Canada having a settler colonial history, it needed to do something to quickly grow the population base and establish itself as a legitimate sovereign state. This way of managing citizenship is a very common thing in the Americas. Think the United States, Mexico, almost all of South America. They all do it this way. Now, this is in contrast with the other way of approaching citizenship, which is jus sanguinis, meaning right to blood. So your citizenship is based on your ancestry and heritage, what citizenship your parents hold, instead of where in the world you happen to be born. Now, before we get carried away, I think it is important to take a step back and first establish the definition of citizenship. In a nutshell, citizenship is a legal construct of belonging to a sovereign state. So that is the state laying claim to you as a subject, and you as a subject laying claim to the protections of the sovereign state. Every child born is conferred one, whether by geographic or biological happenstance. You cannot have refugee babies just running around being stateless and whatnot. Now, while citizenship is primarily a legal concept, it hasn't really stopped society from attaching moral and cultural notions to it as well. And I think that's what the Conservatives are getting at with this policy proposal. Of course, it is critical to point out that the legal way is the only way that matters when it comes to obtaining citizenship. Doesn't matter how culturally or morally Canadian you are, it's just not one of the standards that you have to meet to become a citizen of this country. Sure, in a naturalization process, there is a cultural knowledge component, a citizenship test on history and civics and the way the government works. But they don't ask you whether you practice the culture, like having Thanksgiving in October, saying sorry too much, getting confused at an always stop, and opening the door for someone 100 yards behind you. So now that we have established kind of the basics on citizenship and how you should think about it and approach it, I think it is time now to deconstruct Poilievre's post on, protecting the value and sanctity and, how it is an honor and a privilege and all that. So here it is again. According to the CPC leader, Conservatives will protect the value and integrity of our citizenship by putting an end to birth tourism. Canadian citizenship is an honor and privilege, and it must always be treated as such. For now, I want to hone in on the keyword value in this statement. When you say Canadian citizenship, the value of it needs to be protected. What are the unstated assumptions that need to be true for the statement to make sense? First is the idea that citizenship can be debased to begin with, and that it follows a kind of supply and demand market logic as a mechanism for that debasement to happen. It is being implied here that citizenship can go down in value the more people have it. It's almost as if there's not enough Canadianness to go around, so that the more people who have it, the less valuable it becomes. But what is interesting here, actually, is When Poilievre proposed the idea of devaluing Canadian citizenship, he named birth tourism specifically as one such mechanism. So even then, his own market logic doesn't hold up either. This appears to be more about who is getting the citizenship rather than how they're getting the citizenship, because the mechanism is the same for everybody. And even if we were to ascribe some kind of value to citizenship, what would determine that would actually be, the quality of life, stability and security, the availability of opportunity, right to political participation, ease of travel. It is just overall easier to do things as a citizen of such and such country. That value is impervious to market logic, and it doesn't go up or down based on the incidence of birth tourism year after year. What makes Canadianness valuable is the Canadians themselves who are willing to uphold and work towards those values. But having said all that, the more important part of the conversation is the fact that citizenship is equally a responsibility. It is a civic burden that you carry, not an honor, not a privilege. To suggest that it is any of those things means that citizenship needs to be earned. And while in certain instances that is very much true, say in naturalization proceedings, most people who get their Canadian citizenship get it at birth. They haven't proven anything, they haven't earned anything. They don't deserve the quote unquote honor or privilege of becoming Canadian. Using the word honor specifically also tends to moralize certain types of citizenship acquisition, in the sense that there is a proper and an improper way to do it. Birth tourism being one of the latter. This policy suggestion punishes the child unnecessarily for the transgression of their parents, which, by the way, it is not illegal to give birth to kids here. Michelle Garner, the Conservative MP who called for an end to birthright citizenship in Canada, believes that the meaning of citizenship should be derived from significant enough ties to our nation. So how does that actually work? Like, why the double standard? Why the selective application of normative rules? What even are significant ties? Like, when you're born here as a baby, you don't have those. You don't even know what ties are. Babies have no agency or history or demonstrated connection to Canada. And also, whether your parents are Canadian or not, no one can make the call on how Canadian you'll end up being when you grow up. I'm sure that you can make some kind of statistical argument that being born to Canadian parents is predictive of you being a good Canadian citizen yourself, but it is not a clean if-then conditional statement. Whichever way you look at it, either framework, birth to soil or birth to blood, there's a level of randomness there in relation to the person being assigned citizenship. There is absolutely no guarantee that they're going to grow up to be contributing members of society, but you do it anyway. Now, are there legitimate arguments that can be made against birthright citizenship? Absolutely. But those can be addressed at the granular level. For example, if birthright citizenship is causing, allegedly, undue strain on, say, the healthcare system or any other aspect of the benefits framework that are exclusively available to Canadian citizens, those can be addressed at those levels, at the benefit level, without having to dismantle birthright citizenship itself. If it is being used as a kind of backdoor immigration pathway, then that can be closed as well. That hole can be plugged. If anything, this functionally operates to restrict citizenship to those deemed to be true Canadians. It's a concept that's often based on ideas of culture and race rather than a purely legal framework with a set of specific conditions to satisfy. And what we know about that is that it can always get narrower and narrower. There is a reason that the no true Scotsman fallacy exists. Material problems require precise material solutions. You're not just going to amputate your entire leg if you have something wrong with your toe that you can fix. And that's kind of what they're trying to do here. The conservative solution is to blanket eliminate an entire class of potential Canadians just so we can avoid certain inconsequential administrative issues down the line. And if citizenship were to be redefined to more of a cultural framework rather than a legal construct, then you face a challenge of applying that set of standards, the very same set of standards, to your entire population base. Because that was the entire reason that you eliminated the opportunity for people to gain citizenship without the cultural ties or the moral similitude to Canadianness. Everyone would be subject to measures of Canadianness. Otherwise, the argument doesn't hold up. This is taking it to its logical conclusion. It would be very impractical to do it, but it would be illogical not to. Remember that on the topic of citizenship, if you want to see it from the perspective of privileges and responsibilities, we are more often on the responsibility side of things in our day to day lives. We are not accessing every day the privileges that are available to us as citizens. 9 times out of 10, you're experiencing your citizenship through responsibility, not privilege. And that brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you next time.